Welcome to another Adventures in Eagle Territory. Today, on this Memorial Day weekend, we are thinking about those that fought for our freedoms, and we're celebrating their lives this particular weekend. I would like us to go way back to the Civil War and think about a Civil War icon named Abe. Now, I don't think it's the Abe Lincoln that you were originally thinking. It's actually the eagle named Old Abe, who was the Civil War eagle, who is behind me here in Jim Falls, Wisconsin. Now, in 1861, Chief Sky of the Lac du Flambeau Band of the Lake Superior Ojibwa was out and found a young eagle at a nest that had fallen down. He then took that young eaglet to his camp, and it was there as kind of a family pet for some time. In fact, the children enjoyed watching the eagle trample through the grass, and the eagle enjoyed watching the dog trample through the grass. Well, Chief Sky, unfortunately, was very poor and needed some money to help to feed his family. And so he went to Jim Falls, Wisconsin, where I am today, and met up with Daniel McCann, and ended up selling the eagle to Daniel McCann for $2.50. Daniel McCann took the eagle home, and once again the family there had an eagle pet in the family's backyard. But over time, some of the family members were complaining that the children were getting pierced by the talons, and that eagle needed to move on. And Daniel McCann also was looking to earn some money during those hard times as well. So he went down to Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and he found Captain John Perkins of the 8th Wisconsin Infantry Regiment, who were getting ready to load a paddle boat to head out towards Camp Randall in Madison to prepare for the war. Daniel McCann approached Captain John Perkins and said, "I think you need an eagle. This eagle is ready to enlist for its service to the country." And Captain John Perkins happily paid for the bird and took the bird under his wing, so to speak, and decided to name it Old Abe in honor of President Abraham Lincoln. Now, that was in 1861, so that was in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. They loaded the paddle boat, the Stella Whipple. They took that downriver to eventually getting to La Crosse, going by the way, Wabasha and the National Legal Center, and eventually ending up down into La Crosse, Wisconsin, where then the entire regiment then marched across land all the way to Madison, Wisconsin, where they trained, getting ready for the war. They then headed south for their war efforts. Now, during the war efforts, Old Abe would hang around camp. He was kind of a morale booster for the men in the camp. And at times, he would often lead the groups as they were marching forward on a board. He would march forward, often with some red, white, and blue ribbons tied to this board as they would carry him down to the next battle area. Now, they loved him. They called him the Monarch of the Sky. But for the other side, it was definitely not the Monarch of the Sky. This was a coward. This was a bird. This was a turkey buzzard that needed to be shot at any end. In fact, many different Confederate prisoners would often say they would give more to capture that eagle than an entire brigade of men. In fact, General Price's orders were to be sure to capture that eagle. And I would rather have that than a dozen battle flags. This bird was involved in well over 37 battles and skirmishes. One of them was Vicksburg, that many of us are familiar with from our history books. The other one was at Corinth, Mississippi. And at Corinth, Mississippi, very interesting tale had happened. The eagle was there with the eagle bearer. Old Abe decided to take off, and when he took off, he pulled his great big wings. Now remember, eagles have 6.5 to 7 foot wingspan. That eagle then took off with the eagle bearer, pulling the eagle bearer kind of backwards several feet back. Several feet back, they stopped, and the eagle bearer kind of got his ground, and when he did and he stood up, a cannonball landed exactly where Old Abe and the eagle bearer was. Once the other men in the regiment saw that, they all wanted to be the person that got to handle Old Abe. They would play cards, they would have fights, who was to be the eagle bearer. But over time, only 8 men were honored to be eagle bearers during the war. There are many other unique battles that were had with Old Abe and tales and stories, and I encourage you to look them up on YouTube or come to the Eagle Center to learn more about them. But after the war, Old Abe then ended up at the Capitol in Madison, Wisconsin, where he lived in the basement in the Eagle Department. He lived in the Eagle Department, and folks, visitors from across the state would come to visit Old Abe, the Civil War Eagle. Now, he attracted thousands. He also helped to raise money for charities and also for political parties as well. In fact, in the Great Fair of Chicago, a gentleman, a prizing young gentleman, happened to take a photograph of Old Abe, and he sold that at the Great Fair, and he raised over $16,000 for poor and sick soldiers just from pictures of Old Abe, the Civil War Eagle. So pretty cool story to read about that. Old Abe then lived there at the Capitol until 1881. In fact, March 26, 1881, in a room where paint was being stored, a fire broke out. That fire broke out across the Capitol. They were able to get Old Abe out, but unfortunately, Old Abe succumbed to a lot of smoke inhalation and unfortunately died just a short period of time later. Old Abe was then stuffed in taxidermied form, and then for the next 20 years, he was in the rotunda of the Capitol in Madison, Wisconsin. But unfortunately, on February 26, 1904, another fire affected the Capitol, and this time the entire Capitol was burnt down, including Old Abe, who was lost to the fire. But Old Abe is still in our minds today, and we have many places across Wisconsin here, as we're looking here at this monument in Jim Falls, Wisconsin, but also in Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls. In fact, if you drive down to Chippewa in Irvine Park in Chippewa, they have another wonderful monument there. The Eau Claire police cars have Old Abe emblazoned on their cars. The Memorial High School in Eau Claire, Wisconsin are the Old Abes. And so there are lots of other places across Wisconsin, Old Abe. Maybe you can share with us in the comments below where you have also seen Old Abe here around Wisconsin or across the country. Also, we have books, and we also have an exhibit at the National Eagle Center dedicated to Old Abe. So we encourage you to come down and check them out. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today to learning about eagles, and especially Old Abe, the Civil War, and his role. And as we think about all of our veterans there today, we want to thank them all for their service. I myself had many uncles that were involved in the service. Two of my uncles, Virgil and Herbie, just recently passed away in the last couple of months. So with them, I want to thank them for their service, and all my uncles and all our friends and relatives that have worked to protect and serve our country. Thank you for your time.